Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Jeffrey Brewster on the line. Jeffrey, how are you?
Doing better than I deserve, to use the Dave Ramsey line.
Aren't we all? Yes. Mr. Ramsey gives us all kinds of life advice, investing, financing. Not a big fan of credit. And also just, life and all that kind of stuff. And real quick, and not to be political at all, but there's an internet meme going around where President Biden is calling in to Dave Ramsey to find out, okay, how do I get rid of this $31 trillion debt? I found it funny, not trying to be political at all, but I giggled, and I hope that every side of the fence would at least find some humor in that. But so why don't you share a little bit about you and the awesome work you're doing?
Yeah, so my specialization is business valuation. And I tell people that we help clients understand better. And sometimes that's understanding their valuation better. And sometimes that's understanding how to get a better value for their company. And that involves a number of different things. As you can imagine, there's a human being there that has invested a tremendous amount of time, talent, resources, blood, sweat, sometimes tears. And so it really is a fascinating work that we do to take all of these, financial aspects, accounting aspects, legal aspects, and human aspects, and bring those all together and then present them with this valuation.
And I'm sure you've never had anybody say that their business is so much worth more than what you say, because they've put in those blood, sweat, tears, beers, and everything else that they put into it. And it's one of those things. It's like, of course, you're going to be proud of your creation. You should be. But the value of something is the value of something. And with all the factors that your team uses, it's a great way to say, okay, this is what it's worth. Now, if it's not where you feel it should be, then the next logical question, entrepreneurs, that you should ask is, okay, if I want to get this out of the business, whatever this is,
right?
What steps should I take now in order for that to become a possibility years down the road? So I'm sure.
Precisely. And that is that, the entrepreneur always understands there's levers that they can pull to get the desired results, right? And valuation, although a tremendous amount of it is art, there is a tremendous amount of science with it as well. So there are factors within your control that you can impact. And that's one of the services that we work with entrepreneurs, business owners all the time about, hey, what are these growth factors? What are these operational factors? What's dragging you back? What do you need to emphasize when you're talking with somebody about your business, so that maybe you even, what do they put the emphasis on the strengths and make your weaknesses even stronger? That's what we do. And we'll highlight those and say, hey, listen, here's where your business could improve as far as valuation is concerned. And doing these handful of things, again, it sounds like a consultant that comes in and gives you 25 things to do and then, say, I'll see you in 12 months. We simply put it, we know you're a business owner. We know that means you're busier than maybe you ever thought you were going to be. So let's boil it down to 3, maybe 4, because we know, in all honesty, maybe 1 will get done.
And that's the truth. Yeah, that happens all the time with consultants and coaches. They give this great list of well thought out, studied combination of art and science to take your business to whatever the next level is, or to prepare it for sale, whatever. And what happens is, and this is something that is often overlooked, is you're asking the organization to make changes. And that is a very, very big ask for some companies and individuals. People like, I have to behave differently. Right. And it's like saying somebody, okay, you have been right-handed your entire life. Guess what? You have to write now with your left hand. And it looks like you just handed a writing instrument to an 18-month-old and say, okay, sign your name. And it's just this other appendage for many people is just, use it all the time. But when it comes to writing, it's like, the brain goes, no, it's not going to work unless you're one of those individuals that can use both hands, which keeps you busy. But at the end of the day, I think for organizations and companies to figure out, okay, what do I need to do? Manageable steps, and you have to dig deeper. And I think that's one of the things your team helps people with. And you mentioned, it's like, we know you're a business owner. You are slammed right now. You're trying to build your business. You're doing all these things. So, okay, doing all of these steps to whether it's improve the website, improve your social media brand to get that granular, or, okay, you need to target different markets that are, in this field that you can, of course, bring on additional business, which of course increases the value of your business over time. It's one of those things where people have to realize, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs forget this, is they don't know what they don't know. And when someone comes to them with, here's what you don't know, they should say, okay, well, how do I know that? How do I get to know that? What do I need to do? Whether it's investing additional resources or personnel to help move things along, even if it's a short-term situation, that helps. Or you just realize, like, okay, I want my company to sell for 7 figures. Right now, it's mid 5 figures. Okay, that's a pretty steep climb. Yeah. Not going to do it in a year unless you come up with some kind of solution, or you owned Zoom in April of 2020. Right. Then okay, those things happen, but they are so rare. Don't plan on it. If it happens to you, congratulations. I'll give you my address where you can send the champagne or whatever.
Yeah,
we'll celebrate together. But at the end of the day, it boils down to just understanding that what got you here won't get you there. And that new effort and new skill set and all of that is something that organizations like yours really help out people to kind of say, this is what you're going to have to do.
Yeah, so true, Michael. I mean, and sometimes you get into these companies and you sit down with that entrepreneur or that business owner, and we understand that, listen, there are capacity restraints. That's a fancy word for, I don't have enough of something to get done what you're telling me to do. And you look at, those companies that have that 20 million in revenue, certainly below that, but even that $20 to $50 million revenue company looks at you and says, you do realize I'd have to hire a whole new team to do what you've just mentioned here. And sometimes it's almost like, we've played baseball all these years. Now you want me to go out there on the football field and compete on the football field? That's a real hard ask. That's a hard change. How do we get there? Well, guess what? You don't build a team overnight. Right? It takes time, and making that change is, like you so aptly put, that it really does require a phase in. And sometimes that's a 2, 3, 4, 5 year phase in before you, of course, you're looking for progress and milestones all along the way. But honestly, patience. And sometimes that's the hardest thing, is perseverance during the patience period.
Yeah, everyone is used to that dopamine hit of, all right, business great, got calls today, and all of a sudden it's a completely quiet day, and your brain starts going, did I not post something today? Why isn't anybody resonating with this? I put out those feelers, nothing's happening. I'm not getting callbacks. And your brain just goes down this negative spiral. And then you have another day that is booming. It could be your best day ever. And you're, cracking the champagne and having visions of a boat bigger than Jeff Bezos' boat. And that's a big boat. Not been on it. Don't know if I ever will be on it. If I get invited, sure, I'll take a ride. But I've definitely contributed to help him buy that boat over the years. But another story for another day. But I think, and you're mentioning a lot there. One of the questions that come to mind too is, What are some of the best tools that you guys use in your organizations that you help use to kind of help them with getting the valuation, to kind of figure out where things are and what should they be thinking about as, again, they're planning out their exit strategy or transition strategy of their business to another entity or another level?
Yeah, great question. So we can go in a couple of different directions, and that's one of the things that we do that I do take from my consulting brethren, and that is ask a lot of questions. Really understand and kind of think about the end once you're, the old Stephen Covey, right? Kind of understand the end and plan out from that point. And so your starting point, it feels like you're climbing a mountain. You're standing at the base of the mountain and you're looking at this, 8,000 foot rise in front of you. Well, what's the best path? Well, depends. What season are you in? If you're in the winter season, there's a whole different path you should be taking versus whether you're in the spring. And so these are really questions that you have to be asking and sitting down with the team or with the business owner at the very initial onset of where are we heading? We know that the mountain top, we know where that peak is at. We can see it from here, but how do we get there? And so you ask these questions, and sometimes what we'll find out is, it's a rather direct route. Sometimes we find there's actually a lot of human interaction, and there's a lot of factors, and there are a lot of attributes that are going to change our path and our trajectory. And so we really do have to look for, if you will, different trails at different times as we climb the side of this mountain. So we're going to go through that and kind of put it in specific valuation terms. Sometimes just getting your valuation, understanding how you compare to your competitors, which we can do for you, kind of in a benchmarking analysis, is enough. Okay, great. I understand that my working capital is too high compared, and so I need to really concentrate on, as granular as you want, really got to concentrate on getting those receivables, collected. And really, maybe I'm paying my vendors a little bit too fast, and maybe I can go ahead and take terms from them. That it might be that granular. It very well. I've had situations where we'll look at a company and go, listen, you've got two divisions of the business here. One of them is actually exceeding the cost of capital. The other one is not. And the other one is the one where you're putting all your efforts into. So maybe we need to redirect over to the more consultative side and get a better, rate of return, which exceeds your cost of capital. That's mind-blowing sometimes for business owners. And that's the more direct route. The more, what I would say, holistic route, not that valuation isn't in itself a holistic approach, but an even more holistic route is to sit back and go, let's take a look at the valuation gap that we're facing and what's causing that gap and what attributes of growth and operations within inside of your company need to be addressed first, because they're causing the biggest amount of gap. Putting it in a positive way, where if I take your efforts and focus on them, are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck? For your efforts, for your blood, sweat, and tears and beers. I'm going to use that. I like that. Blood, sweat, tears, and beers. So, if you put that into this effort and into this initiative, you're going to close that gap faster, or you're going to close more of that gap. Well, let's focus on those. And that's how we get to that handful of things that a business owner or a team should be focusing on as they look at their valuation. And again, back to the mountain analogy, look at the pinnacle and go, and that's where we're trying to get to. And maybe there are some changes that we need to make along the way. But it's very consultative, Michael. I mean, we are always asking questions and getting into the process and going, okay, we thought we understood this, but now you told us something that makes us think differently. Let's revisit that one more time.
That's the power of asking questions. You get information, and sometimes you get some new information that could happen innocently and go, wait a minute, that could change it to shortening that gap, or wow, that gap just got larger. Okay. Right. Well, and we got to go back and redo some things. So organization goes through this exercise. They close the gap and they get it to the point where it's like, okay, I'm thinking about, maybe they might be a little bit older or they just want to do something different. There's a lot of options in transitioning your business. So, and I think a lot of people think, well, I just have to sell the business, but there's, obviously in the work that you do, there's more ways to transition that business to a different owner or different things. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, very, very good question. And it's so timely because seasons change, right? And the season of sometimes the private equity or the venture capital buyout of your company where money was just flowing and transactions just seem to be happening effortlessly. And what we called the dry powder just never seemed to go away. There was such an insatiable demand for businesses that these multiples were being paid and these transactions just were in the nosebleed area. Seasons change. And sometimes that transition of, well, do I sell to one of these groups? Or maybe the seasons have changed enough, or the season has changed enough that now we need to start taking into consideration there might be a group within the company that is a good legacy group that I'd like to transfer that legacy to them. How do we do that? Or maybe it's you can also use an ESOP where you're actually selling that to the employees, or really you're selling it technically to the ESOP trust, which then has beneficiaries. And I grew up in the ESOP world. It's a wonderful structure. It has to be done correctly, and it doesn't solve all the ills and wills of a company. So, we really, and I've had plenty of experiences where you sit down and you, again, ask those questions. You go, you do understand that this is the next step in the ESOP process, but there are these other transfers. So again, there are a number of things that a business owner has at their disposal. Just because you hear the transactions are slowing, or because interest rates are higher today, that multiples are lower. If you can even get the transaction done, we've got a client right now that, quite frankly, thought they were going to have a term sheet in their hands on selling a portion of their business by now, and it hasn't materialized. Well, there's enough turmoil in the capital markets that sometimes people just go, yeah, right now, not right now. We're going to take a pause. Well, now what do you do? Well, now you have to, if you really have only been thinking about that, it might be that you need to start thinking about some other options as well at the same time. Plan A, plan B, right? So there are plenty of options available. It just, again, might be a little more planning, a little more strategizing, and a little more patience and perseverance through the process. So maybe you were thinking you were going to exit 100% of the company, but maybe you need to figure out how to do it 20% at a time. So again, those are all the things that we'll sit down with the client very early on and say, tell me what your end goal looks like. And have you thought about plan B and plan C?
Or plan D or plan W, or when the world is completely sideways, and it happens, with the pandemic that happened, or global conflicts, recessions come and go, interest rates low for a long time, rising, they'll come back down again at some point. It's an ebb and flow. And that's why it helps. And I know your organization does this. It's like, okay, let's take a step back and kind of look at big picture. And yes, everybody just want to look like this tunnel, like right through this little sliver. It's like, no, let's go big picture. Right. The Covey quote you gave earlier, what's the end in mind? Okay, where are you at now? Or Steve Jobs had once, like, here's this, here we are, work backwards. And whatever works for you, do it, because ultimately you want to obviously get gains from your time and effort and all of that. But, once you figure out what your business is worth and what it could be worth with effort, it's like following a recipe to cook something. And I think sometimes people overcomplicate it. Not saying that it isn't complicated. There's things that have to play. There's external factors and whatnot. But simplify it as best you can and follow a recipe that your organization can lay out, and you check things along the way. It's like, okay, what's the temperature? Okay, how many more minutes to bake this? Okay, how's it looking? Is it browning, or whatever you're cooking? And then it's like, okay, you follow instructions, and sometimes go, wow, this thing's still frozen in the middle. Wow, I better adjust the freezer because it doesn't need to be frozen tundra cold to keep this stuff cold. But again, that's all these things are very important. So, Jeffrey, I love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and this amazing work you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to help. Always open for a conversation. Call, text 469-394-1448. Again, one more time is 469-394-1448. I will answer your text. My goal is to try and get back to you within 24 hours. If you want to email me, it's jeffrey.brewster@objectivecp.com. Again, that's Jeffrey, Jeffrey.Brewster, B as in boy, REWSTER, at objective.com. Objectivecp.com.
And I'll definitely have that information in the show notes. So continued success, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.